Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18. Thanks for stopping by my channel. Today I wanted to just share a little bit of my experience with a reading tag that is on YouTube as well as Instagram called Stay Home Reading Rush. And so the idea for this activity, Stay Home Reading Rush, was to essentially read, as much as we could, I guess, over the course of 4 days, which was last week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I saw this Stay Home Reading Rush idea on Katie Flowers' channel, who did, videos for each of the 4 days talking about what she was reading for each of those days. I will link to Katie's first video in the series of 4 below. I've never done anything like this, and frankly, I still don't know if I have because I didn't really follow the rules. I'm not one for rules. I thought I would tell you about it anyway. I like chatting about books. So the idea of the Stay Home Reading Rush, and I'll link the video below as well from the channel called The Reading Rush, who created this activity, and explain the different questions and challenges. So the idea is that there were 4 reading challenges to do at any time over the 4 days, and then there are also a series of questions to answer in a tag, either in a video, which I'm going to do now, or you could on on Instagram as well if you're not on YouTube. And there were, there might have been some Instagram photo prompts as well. I didn't do that part. So I thought I would go through and just discuss the challenges a little bit, and then answer some of these tag questions, and I'll copy them all below for reference. And I will say I'm not much one for challenges in general. I'm certainly not a very competitive person, and there are aspects of the idea of reading as much as I can in a short period of time that I'm like, oh, but will I not, enjoy a book as much if I'm like rushing, right? Like the idea of Stay Home Reading Rush, I don't want to rush through, the books that I'm reading, but I do, as folks know, have a, book pile of shame and books to read and an ebook folder of shame to work through and lots of things to read. So certainly reading some books in a particular time frame is not particularly challenging for me at all. But I'm, following the rules, not so much. Also rushing, like my moon and Mars are both in Taurus in my chart. I don't rush. I don't like to be rushed. It doesn't work. But I did read 5 books in 4 days, or like most of 5 books in 4 days. One of them I had already started. So I don't know if that's a cheat or not. Whatever, I'm going to talk about them anyway. So there were 4 reading challenges. The first was to read a book with a house on the cover. Didn't do that. I did look in my ebook folder to see if there was something in there that would fit the bill of having a house on the cover, but there wasn't. And I'm not buying new books or acquiring new books for the most part right now, since I have so many to work through, so I just skipped that part. The second challenge was to read a book in the same room the whole time. That I did a few times. I've mostly been reading on my couch, which you can't see, but it's right over there. So 2 out of the 5 books I'm going to talk about, I did read in the same room, and that was on the sofa in my living room. The third challenge was to read a book set somewhere you wish that you could go. So I did this a little bit in different ways, I guess. The first book that I'm going to talk about is How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, which was the Blossom Book Club book with Katie Flowers for this month. And I had started the book already and read, I think, maybe a chapter and a half or 2 chapters before this Reading Rush business started, but I finished it during that time. And that author, Jenny Odell, I wouldn't say the book is set in California, but she talks quite a bit in the book about living in Oakland. And I have been to California once, but I would love to go again. So maybe that counts. I'm not sure. And then the rest of the books that I read were mostly fantasy, and some of them set in outer space. For a sci-fi enthusiast, I'm actually not that enthused about going to outer space. I'm claustrophobic. But it's interesting. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I satisfied that. Read a book set somewhere you wish you could go. I don't know. And the last challenge was to read a book that will make you smile. Reading makes me smile, so I definitely accomplished that one. So the 5 books that I read in 4 days, for the most part. The first was How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, which I read on my Kindle. So again, I don't have much to show you. But this book was really interesting. It's I think, combination of a bit of memoir, cultural criticism, art criticism, political musings about contemporary media landscapes. An interesting one. And the subtitle talks about the attention economy, How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy, I think it is. And there was a lot in this book that I could relate to. Early on in the book, she starts to talk about, for example, the idea that it's increasingly common for us to not necessarily, say, have a 9-to-5 job where we go to work and then we come home, but we have this kind of flexible scheduling, which is kind of presented as flexible, but really it means we're kind of always on, or like anywhere we are is a potential workspace, right? Like our home is potentially our workplace, our car is potentially our workplace. And I could really relate to that. A lot of my work operates in that way. And there are benefits and drawbacks to that, certainly. She had a lot of criticisms about contemporary social media that I certainly share, in terms of the ways in which we encounter these kind of barrages of largely decontextualized information. Particularly think about, Facebook wall, and I'm like not on Facebook, and I'm not going to be. But you get fed all of this information that's really disjointed and disconnected, and we're constantly refreshing, but everything is so kind of both spatially and temporally disconnected that it's hard to really kind of make sense of, and what are the kind of implications of that politically and socially in terms of our relationships. Lots of interesting thoughts in this book. I made some notes actually for the purposes of the Blossom Book Club, which I'm still kind of mulling over. But it was an interesting read, and I would recommend it if you read the back of the book jacket and it interests you. I thought it was very much worth reading. The second book I read, the only one that I have physically to show you, is The Mythic Dream. This is edited by Dominik Parisien and Navah Wolfe. And this was a book that I didn't really put on my book stack of shame because I got it for Christmas. So I haven't owned it long enough to be ashamed of not having read it yet. But this is an anthology of contemporary retellings of myths. So not necessarily contemporarily set, but written contemporarily anyway. And the myths are drawn from a lot of diverse pantheons. So there are some myths of Greek gods and heroes in here. Those are the ones that I was maybe the most familiar with, was the Greek pantheon. But there are also quite a few others. There was at least one or maybe two indigenous ones. There were one, if not two, from the Norse pantheon, which I don't know a ton about. There was, I think, a Celtic one. So it was a really interesting read. It was a bit easier for me to make sense of the ones that I was familiar with the myth to begin with. So they do tell you for each one the myth that the story is based on, and then there's a little author's note at the end where the author kind of explains how they came to the idea or why they picked that myth to adapt. The ones that I hadn't read the myth before, or that I had not even heard of, I want to go investigate now, because those, it's hard to read an adaptation of something without knowing the original, like, at all, insofar as myths have an original, right? that's another discussion. But I would like to read more about mythology in general, and I will say often I find anthologies to be really, really inconsistent. Part of the reason that I put this book on a bit of a Christmas list for my mom, who got it for me, was because there was some names of some authors in there that I was interested in reading larger works from, and I thought that this would be a way to kind of, check out some folks writing for the first time in a short, digestible format who I was interested in reading. And really, I liked the very, very vast majority of myths in this book. I certainly liked, a few of them more than others, and some of them were really standout for me. There were one or two that just weren't really my thing personally, but overall, I think that this book, if you're interested in mythology, or even if you just like reading short stories, I thought that this was really, really excellent. I'm really glad I read it. Definitely recommend for sure. A couple of these authors I have read now. So one of the authors, for example, is Nnedi, and I just read a novel by Nnedi, which I also really loved. But there are definitely some others now that I'm going to be seeking out. My Goodreads bookmark list of books to read has grown thanks to this one. And then the third, fourth, and fifth books that I read, all on my Kindle, were all a series of novellas, and this is the Binti trilogy. So the books are called Binti, Binti Home, and Binti the Night Masquerade, all by Nnedi Okorafor, who I've read before a little bit. And Binti was one that I had gotten the ebook, and just I hadn't read it yet, but it was here in my collection of ebooks, and I knew that I'm in this stay-home reading rush and want to have more than one book to talk about. And I knew that as a novella, Binti was shorter, around 100 pages or so. So I thought, well, this is a perfect time to read that. And I almost read Binti, Binti Home, and Binti Night Masquerade in a day and 3/4. I fell in love with Binti and her story, and this is a trilogy that starts off, I guess, the context for Binti, and that's the name of the main character, and she's a young woman in her late teens when the story starts, and she is Himba, is her ethnic group or national group in Africa, and this is a future set. Nnedi Okorafor writes African futurism, not Afrofuturism, African futurism, and Binti is chosen or is admitted to go to this great university several star systems or planets away, and she's the first Himba person to get in and to accept and to go. And she's never left her home before. She's never not been with her family. And so the start of the first novella starts with her going to this university, and she's a mathematical genius. She has, various mathematical and also kind of what we would say mystical, magical abilities. She's brilliant, and so she goes, and I don't want to give too much away because, again, the books are short, and I feel like if I say too much about the plot, it will be obvious. But in the first book, her ship is attacked, the ship that she's on going to the school, and so she has to navigate this situation with these completely unfamiliar to her aliens attacking the ship, and this sets off the story that goes through the trilogy, and it just grabbed me immediately. I'm so glad that, if nothing else, looking for something in a novella length to read for this challenge made me read Binti, and had been in my folder for so long. I'm glad to have had this push to read that, because I inhaled all three in very short time. I loved them. I would recommend them. I would read them again. So good. The Binti trilogy by Nnedi Okorafor. So if you haven't read those, and you like science fiction, or it sounds like something that you would be interested in, fantastic. So fantastic. So that's the 5 books I read. And so now there are, for the Stay Home Reading Rush, a series of reading tag questions. And I'm not quite sure. I'm pretty sure the idea here was to answer these on the first day of Stay Home Reading Rush. Now here we are 2 days after it ended. That's okay, considering I discarded one of the 4 challenges, and I didn't really read as much as I could possibly read in 4 days. I read slightly more than I perhaps would have otherwise in 4 days at a pace that felt good to me, and I feel fine about it. So maybe that's my new tag, read as much as you want. Read as much as you want, and that's fine, hashtag, right? But there are these reading tag questions, and I've been noticing, like, folks seem to enjoy book videos on my channel, and there was some enthusiasm for a book review that I am planning to do, and so I figured why not talk about this reading tags, and we can chat about reading. So, question number 1, how is your reading going while staying home? I've been reading a ton. My partner is still working right now, having been deemed to be an essential worker, so they've been allowed to continue working. And I've also finished my main job, so my teaching work is pretty much done. I'm just kind of submitting grades and things like that. So I'm at home, mostly by myself for the duration of the day. And, I've been doing things around the house, but I've also been reading quite a lot. And I've read a lot that I've enjoyed, I will say. Where have you been reading at home is the second question. Almost exclusively on my sofa, which is right over there. I had gotten a new sofa just last year. It's very comfortable. It comfortably accommodates myself and 2 cats. Get some natural light. Perfect. Number 3, the best book you've read during isolation. I just, gushed over the Binti trilogy. I loved the Binti trilogy. I will say if I had to pick, I liked the first one the best, and then I would say my second choice, I liked the third one. The second one feels like a second, like it picks up kind of in the middle of somewhere from the first, and then there's, there's going to be a third one, so it's not the most satisfying ending on its own, but I loved all 3. If I had to pick another book that I've read during this physical isolation time, that wasn't during the Stay Home Reading Rush, but was another favorite, I would pick To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers, which is another novella about astronauts on a long-term mission exploring some different planets. I'm really into the novella as a form right now, especially for science fiction. They're longer than a short story, so you get more character development, but they're shorter than a lot of the novels that I normally read that are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. And I really liked To Be Taught If Fortunate, and I love Becky Chambers' work a lot, so that was another favorite. What is your favorite feel-good book? I love this question, and I want to know in the comments, please, from everybody what their favorite feel-good book is. I don't think that the books that I chose are what this prompt had in mind, but this is where my mind went, and I picked 2. My first favorite feel-good book is Vegan Tacos by Jason Wyrick, and I feel like this is fairly self-explanatory. This has a wide array of different types of vegan tacos with all different types of fillings and all different kinds of sauces and all different kind of hot sauces. I love hot sauce. I could actually feasibly have a mini fridge in my house just for hot sauce. So definitely for a feel-good book, Vegan Tacos by Jason Wyrick. The other one that I chose as a feel-good book that just I smile whenever I see it is called Cats in Hats, 30 knit and crochet patterns for your kitty. And I will say, with no, embarrassment whatsoever, I have not knitted or crocheted a thing out of this book, but banana hat, and this is by Sarah Thomas. There's an alien hat there. You can put your cat in a turkey hat. Really, the photos in this book just make me really happy. And I may knit or crochet a hat for a cat someday. I'm not sure. I mean, I think Daryl would probably eat it if I did. Bandit would just not be impressed at all. But I am really glad that this book is in the world, and that I think it was my grandma picked this for me. So this is another feel-good book, Cats and Hats. The next question is the book you wish you could buy or borrow from the library. I'm not sure what's going on, like where other folks are, but where I am, I could quite easily buy a book right now. Obviously with the Kindle, I can buy an ebook and it just, ports directly onto the Kindle pretty much instantaneously. So I can get new books that way. Though I have been keeping to my depth here commitment for the most part of not buying new books. Also like big, online book retailers, and there are several of them that I have ordered from and do order from, are operating in terms of delivery. So if I wanted to order a book, I could. I also have a card and membership at 2 different libraries, an academic one and a public library, and they have good selections of ebooks as well. They're not open to go browse, but I don't feel like at this point I can't get anything. There aren't any books that I wish, to answer the question, there's not a book that I wish I could buy or borrow that I feel like I'm in a position that I can't. So, not applicable. Next question, the author that you want to shout out during this time. I love so many authors. It's really hard to choose. Becky Chambers, To Be Fortunate, and Wayfarer Trilogy, love Becky Chambers' work. Nnedi Okorafor, Binti Trilogy, love Nnedi Okorafor's work. N.K. Jemisin, one of my all-time favorite authors, has a brand new novel out, The City We Became, but that one I haven't actually read it yet. It's sitting on my desk. I've been kind of saving it. But shout out to N.K. Jemisin for sure. She's amazing and brilliant. There are so many amazing authors. It's really hard to pick, but that's a few whose work I've been enjoying. And then the last question was, what is your Reading Rush TBR? I had to actually look this up, that TBR is the to read. It's like your to be read pile. I'm answering this after Stay Home Reading Rush, so I read what I read. I'm fine with it. Folks know I have my reading pile of shame, which I've talked about, with 10 books on it that I wanted to read before the end of this year. Right now I am reading from that list The Man Who Never Died, which is a book about the life of Joe Hill, the amazing songwriter for the IWW. And I'm also currently reading Spiral Dance by Starhawk, which I kind of can't believe I've never read. But I just started. And next month, so May, in Katie Flower's Blossom Book Club, we are going to be reading Queering the Tarot by Cassandra Snow, which is also on my to-read list. So those are the books that I'm reading, in the most foreseeable future. I don't know what's going to be picked for the Literary Witches Project for May, but I'm keen to see, and I plan to read along with that as well. So that is all the reading tag questions. If you would like to answer the questions, even if you didn't do the rush, that's fine. Reading's not competitive, right? Read what you want at the speed you want and the speed you have the capacity for, and as an ebook or an audiobook or whatever works for you. And I think that that's great. So yeah, do share if you've been reading anything in particular, and please do share. I realized, thinking about this feel-good book question, staying at home at this time and reading a lot of fiction again, I'm acutely aware now of how much of the fiction I read is not feel good. Is not feel good at all. And I've been reading some heavy reads, like the Literary Witches Book Club choices so far. There's been some really intense books in there. And the fiction I read generally is not feel good necessarily. So I would love to know your feel good books, because I could always use a feel good book. Maybe particularly now, I'm not so much feeling the desire to read like apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic horror at the moment. So let me know your feel-good books. And if you participated in Stay Home Reading Rush, let me know how it was for you, or if you participate in kind of book Instagram or book YouTube challenges as a thing. I've never done anything like this before. Let me know how it went for you. It's been fun chatting as always. I hope you are well, and I will see you again soon.